Hello, I'm David Cannadine, editor of the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to introduce the publication of the latest update of the ODNB, which consists of biographies of 226 men and women who shaped many aspects of recent British history and who died in 2011. This latest update continues the dictionary's practice of adding to its coverage each year, which it's done ever since 2004, of people who have died and been major figures in the making of modern British history. And the people we're including in this latest tranche of new biographies all died in the year 2011. It's a complicated business deciding who exactly to include in the new biographies that we publish each year. And the way we go about this is drawing up a long list of possible subjects drawn from current newspaper obituaries and other sources. This long list is then reviewed by a panel of about 450 expert advisors, ranging from the worlds of public life to sport, from business to religion. And on the basis of their recommendations, the ODNB editors then draw up a final list of about 220 to 230 individuals who we think were the most notable in their time, dying in 2011, as is the case with this latest tranche of new lives. And it's those lives that we then commission and which we then include and put up electronically each year. The 226 men and women who died in 2011 and who we've included in this latest ODNB update were a remarkably varied and versatile group of people. And there are lots of different ways of thinking about who they were and what categories we could put them in. One of the ways of thinking about them is in terms of the astonishing range of ages, some very old, some very young, many in between. At one end of the spectrum comes a figure called Claude Cool, who had been born as far back as 1901 and who was the last serving British-born combatant to survive from the First World War. At the other end of the spectrum was the singer and songwriter Amy Winehouse, who had been born as recently as 1983. Many of the people who died in 2011 were involved in the Second World War. Among them, SOE operatives such as Patrick Leigh Fermor in Greece, who later went on to become an extremely prominent and distinguished travel writer, and Nancy Wake, who led a group of resistance fighters in the Auvergne. There are also many lives from film and television and the stage and screen, including Elizabeth Taylor, the actress, the film director Ken Russell, John Barry, the composer, especially associated with the James Bond films, and David Croft, the co-author of Dad's Army. There are also figures from the celebrity world of modern music and entertainment whose lives didn't always end happily. Among them, Kathy Kirby, reputedly the highest paid female performer during the 1960s, who nevertheless failed to adapt to later developments in the world of pop music, and Amy Winehouse, whose 3 studio albums were enormously successful and influential, but whose self-destructive streak led to her death from alcohol poisoning when just 27 years old. Of course, it's the case that we give adequate and appropriate attention to such well-known names as Elizabeth Taylor, Amy Winehouse and Ken Russell, and to them we should certainly add Lucian Freud, the great painter of his time, and the marvellously contrarian journalist Christopher Hitchens, as well as actors like Susanna York and Peter Postlethwaite. But it's also one of our purposes, and here our panel of experts are hugely helpful because they're drawn from such a wide range of subject categories. It's one of our purposes to try to ensure that we also include in these annual updates many figures of real historical significance who nevertheless didn't make the headlines in the way that people like Elizabeth Taylor and Amy Winehouse and Ken Russell and Lucian Freud did. And much of the interest and pleasure and I think excitement and novelty of this latest tranche of lives, like those that have gone before, is indeed discovering the extraordinary contributions made by people who are not perhaps as famous as they ought to be, but who perhaps, thanks to their entries in the ODNB, will acquire a sort of posthumous recognition that they certainly deserve. Here are two examples of exactly such people and exactly such lives taken from the realm of science. The first of them is someone called Leslie Ordus, who was a botanist and was captured and imprisoned by the Japanese during the Second World War, and put to work, like many of his fellow prisoners, in terrible conditions of a slave labour camp. Ordus used his botanical training to produce a nutritional supplement derived from soya beans. And this supplement saved the lives of hundreds of his fellow prisoners of war before the end of hostilities in 1945. After the war, Ordus became a successful academic scientist, but his remarkable prison camp work went effectively unrecognised by anyone except his fellow inmates, who owed him everything and certainly their lives. My second example is someone named Leslie Collier, who was a virologist whose development of a heat-stable vaccine for smallpox made it possible for the first time for the vaccine to be easily transported to hot climates where the disease was often particularly prevalent. This led to a successful mass vaccination program, and in 1980 the World Health Organization announced that smallpox had been completely eradicated. And to Collier, more than anyone else, goes the distinction of having helped to bring that about. A disease that had ravaged the world for over 3,000 years had completely disappeared. In later talks and articles about smallpox's complete eradication, Collier made no mention of his own undeniably hugely important role. But here, in the life that we have produced in this latest tranche of biographies for the ODNB, it's possible for the first time fully to realise how significant his contribution was. All of these new 226 biographies that have now been added to the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography can be found on the ODNB's website. And the complete ODNB, of which these new lives are the latest instalment, is available free from anywhere at any time via many colleges and universities around the world. Here in Britain, the ODNB can also be accessed by virtually all public libraries. Members of libraries can read these new biographies, as well as the nearly 60,000 other lives which they complement, either in the libraries of which they are members, or also from their own home, using the public library card number as the personal login. I think these new lives are hugely interesting, memorable, and fascinating, and I hope that you will find them as pleasurable, as varied and diverting as all of us at the ODNB and all of our friends and collaborators and contributors have found being involved in the process of writing them and of editing them.